What is going on, everybody? This is episode 10 of Let's Be Frank with your host, Frank Mattis, brought to you by the Old City Sports Network. And we have a lot of things to get into, including the Eagles. They obviously got the win against the Cleveland Browns last Sunday in a dogfight, which was not the greatest game to watch, but a win is a win in a lot of ways. I will get, in depth in terms of some of my reactions, some of the negatives, some of the positives. I will obviously get will give you also a preview of the Giants matchup for the Eagles this coming Sunday. I will also talk about the Phillies essentially running it back with their coaching staff. I have some thoughts on that. The Sixers, unfortunately, start off the season with the injury bug with Paul George and Joel Embiid statuses uncertain for the season opener against the Bucks. And I will also talk about the Flyers start on the West Coast. So let's talk about the Eagles. So they get the W. A win is a win in a lot of ways, but it's concerning when you're going up against an inferior team in the Cleveland Browns with one of the worst quarterback situations in the NFL. They are essentially forced to start Deshaun Watson given the contract and all the cap implications. There's really no easy way to get out of that. Me personally, if I was Kevin Stefanski, and I have a lot of respect for Kevin Stefanski, he's a former coach of the year. He has helped the Browns make 2 playoff appearances in the last couple of years, and I think he's a really good coach. But he's dealt with a tough situation. If I were him, I would have easily gone to Jameis Winston at this point. But I mean, the owner clearly wants to stick with Deshaun Watson and try to salvage that. And I don't know if there's really any way to salvage that. If I were him, I'd resign personally because he's in a lose-lose situation. He's probably going to get fired. Regardless of whether or not he starts Deshaun Watson, but you never know, if you don't start Jameis Winston. So, I mean, they're just wasting time and stacking up L's. And it's a really unfortunate situation for him. But in regards to the Eagles' performance, look, there were clear negatives, right? I mean, the slow starts again. They have yet to score points in the first quarter. That's a problem given the artillery you have on the offensive side of the ball. It has to change. You gotta start off strong. Jalen started off with 5 incompletions. He started off 0-5. Not good there, but he did pick up and played well and was one of the catalysts as to why the Eagles won. So I have some thoughts on that later on. When you saw them drive at the end of the first half, they looked pretty good. They looked like they were gonna get a 10-point lead going into the half, and then they had the blocked field goal by Myles Garrett, who's a freak of nature, to ultimately tie the game. And given the way the defense played, because I thought they did a really nice job. In terms of stopping the run, it wasn't so great. Again, another up and down week for Zach Bone and Nakobe Dean. That's not great, but I thought the secondary did a pretty nice. I thought the defensive line was opportunistic going up against a depleted offensive line. I thought it was Nolan Smith's one of his best games. Brandon Graham's still playing at a high level, which is very impressive. So that's good to see, to be opportunistic and have that sense of urgency to take advantage of a good matchup for them. But there were some issues in stopping Pierre Strong, third string running back. There's kind of no excuse for that. They should have, been able to have a lot of success there, and they weren't as successful. But ultimately I thought the defense did, a good job. But then again, what does that say? I mean, is it the Eagles played really well, or is it that the Cleveland's really bad? So there's kind of that dynamic there. But all in all, I thought they were fine. Thought they were good. And in a lot of ways, that game probably could have been easily 23-9 as opposed to 20-16, because the Cleveland Browns offense couldn't do anything. When they were driving at the end, they just shot themselves in the foot in terms of penalties. But that's Cleveland for you. But luckily, they weren't able to take advantage, and the Eagles at the end did a really nice job of sealing the deal. Saquon probably had his worst game with the Eagles. He didn't really get a lot of traction there. Injuries piled up as well with Dallas Goedert and Jordan Mailata. It seems like Jordan Mailata is going to be out for a while. Darius Slay also got hurt, but he was practicing this week a bit. So yeah, injuries is not great, especially early on in the season when you already had your bye. It's not the best, but you had guys like Grant Calcaterra step up in a big way. I was singing his praises all off season. I think he's going to be a much bigger fixture in this offense than a lot of people think. And he showed up in a big way on Sunday. So good for him. And then obviously in terms of negatives, we had the whole Nick Sirianni thing. I mean, what is there to say at this point? I mean, to knowing that you're under the microscope and knowing that your job is on the line and knowing that people already are aware of your antics, like, why would you add more fuel to the fire? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's stupid. It goes to show you that he's in over his head and, that he's just in a lot of ways having a mental breakdown. That's the behavior he exhibited last Sunday. And to use your kids as shields, at the press conference to not, to not field the tough questions and to come from that situation, yelling at the fans. I think it was a gutless move in a lot of ways. Nothing against, his family or his kids, from what we've all seen, his kids seem pretty charming and, they seem like good kids, and I'm sure Nick Sirianni's a good father, but as a head coach who is under the hot seat and is under the microscope, he's just not handling it well. And, you just don't go after Eagles fans. It's just not something that you do when they're in the right. I mean, they have every right to be pissed off. This was a game that I had my eye on in terms of going to. I ultimately did not pull the trigger. And I can imagine a lot of people spent good money on those games, good money on those tickets and those seats. And to get a product like that, it's, that's to be expected. They're going to voice their opinion. I mean, this is Philadelphia for you. And if you can't handle that, then, we'll get a coach that will be able to handle that. Cause, the city's not cut out for everybody, whether it's a player, whether it's a coach. And it seems like Nick Sirianni is in over his head. And the only silver lining that can come from this is that the team rallies behind him. The team is motivated to defend him, as he's just taking a beating from the media, and rightfully so. This is the final straw that breaks the camel's back in terms of, like, I got to get my act together. I just got to keep my mouth shut. Less is more. Don't put don't put me in a situation where I set myself up for criticism. He's under the microscope and rightfully so, whether it's in terms of his antics, whether it's in terms of getting this team going early. He's facing a lot of criticism, and, I can imagine Jeffrey Lurie had something to say because he apologized, which, I mean, it is what it is at this point. I need to see results. I need to see a guy that, can handle criticism. It's going to keep his mouth shut. Who's not going to put his foot in his mouth and see better product on the field. Now, despite the fact that it wasn't the greatest of wins for the Eagles, there were some positives. The first positive, or the main positive to me, is A.J. Brown being back. I mean, this guy is one of the best wide receivers in football. This guy is, without a doubt, the best wide receiver talent the Eagles have ever had. He's just a freak of nature. He can pretty much run every route. He can win one-on-one balls. He's got unbelievable hands. He's physical. He's fast. I'm very fortunate to have somebody like A.J. Brown on my team. And, he's a guy that, is very vocal in terms of, like, wanting the ball. But that's wide receivers for you, dude. I feel like sometimes from certain people, he doesn't get a fair shake. People look at him and see T.O., and I don't see that at all. I think he's a team guy. Wide receivers just want the ball, dude. And when he gets the ball, good things happen, like icing the game at the end against the Browns. So I really liked seeing him back and doing his thing. I also have him on my fantasy team, so um, his production was greatly appreciated by me in that regard. Jalen Hurts, definitely his most efficient game of the year. Like I alluded to early on, it was a slow start, and that needs to change. But despite the slow start, I thought he was very efficient. He was reading the field well, getting the ball, to the right players. Those mesh concepts, man, they're a killer, going against this team. And obviously Devontae Smith was able to, you know, get that touchdown underneath, and kudos to Jalen for recognizing that. Um, and I've said it all, off season. I think that's a play and a concept that's going to pay dividends for the Eagles, and even with Dallas Goedert out, to not with somebody of his caliber stretching out the field and creating traffic in the middle, they were still able to do that. So kudos to Jalen for reading that. He looked good running the ball as well, and no turnovers. Now, it we obviously need to see more. We obviously need to see this on a consistent basis, but it's a good start. It's a good step forward for him coming out of the bye. He was, like I said earlier, one of the catalysts as to why the Eagles won this game. And I thought he looked good. It's a step in the right direction. Grant Calcaterra filled in nicely for Dallas Goedert when he went down. That's a guy that I was singing his praises this offseason. And he showed up in a big way. And he's very athletic. He's got a lot of speed for a tight end. And, as he gets acclimated in this offense, and once Dallas Goedert comes back, you have two very capable tight ends to go along with, two wide receiver ones in AJ and Devontae. So that's gonna be good going forward. You also got a Jahan Dotson sighting towards the end of the game, which is good. Finally getting him involved, getting him comfortable, because he's somebody that has the talent, but for whatever reason, he just hasn't gotten over that hump in terms of what he's capable of. And hopefully now that him and Jalen, started to link up a bit in this game, they can continue to make progress going forward. So, and he's a guy that, in terms of mesh concepts, he was the guy that was able to spring Dallas Goedert open in that game against the Saints. So getting him open, getting him involved is also a positive, because I think he's got a lot of talent, he's got a lot of potential, and it's just a matter of getting him acclimated and getting him comfortable. So I like what I saw there. Obviously, I talked about the Eagles D line taking advantage of a depleted Browns offensive line. And that's something that really helped us out a lot in terms of our secondary. There's just not a lot open when you get a pass rush and you get to the quarterback. You take a lot of pressure off of our corners. And obviously with the Eagles dealing with the Darius Slay injury and breaking in some guys, that helps a lot. And speaking of breaking in guys, let's talk about Cooper DeJean. I thought he was fantastic. They used him in a lot of different situations. They had him blitzing a couple times. He looked pretty comfortable in his first first start. I think that if you're Vic Fangio and seeing his versatility in 1 week, and coming off of an injury, I can only imagine what they got cooked up for him going forward. So I like what I saw there. So he's a guy that we're obviously counting on, with the injuries to Slay. You also have Kenyon Mitchell, still getting better. So, that's a good sign, seeing him, coming back and in his first start, really, really showing out. So, as far as other things with that game, I thought Nolan Smith played well early on in that game. So, I'll take that from him, because he really hasn't shown anything. So there was at least something from him, which is nice. And then Brandon Graham, obviously, the ageless wonder that he is, still showing out at a high level, is pretty remarkable. So, with the Browns in the rear view, let's talk about the Giants. Um, a lot's been said about Nick Sirianni, but the one thing that is certain about Nick Sirianni is he does have his way with the Giants, which is a good thing going into this week in terms of, being under the microscope and everybody, basically calling you a clown and with good reason. And, this is a good game for him to get right. And hopefully this can be a more decisive win. Yeah, I thought the Browns game would be that. But I think this could easily be that. You have the revenge game, the revenge factor with Saquon Barkley, Mekhi Becton, talking about he's not looking forward to playing there, because when he was at the Jets, there was obviously their field's not great. So he looks motivated, to play at a high level there. There's some drawing back and forth there, which I like to see. Get after it. And it's a very favorable matchup. The Giants are 20th in offense in terms of yardage. They're 29th in points per game. I mean, this defense should feast on this inept offense. It looks like Malik Neighbors will play. So that's going to be very interesting. I don't know if Slay, it looks like he's trending to play. But if we get Kenyon Mitchell on him, that's going to be a very interesting matchup. It's a matchup that's that we're going to see for many years to come. But just as a football fan, I'm really excited to see, and I'm curious to see how Kenyon deals with that. They're going to get some juice there, obviously with Neighbors that they need, because Daniel Jones is limited. He's playing a lot. He's playing better this year, but it is what it is. He's still Daniel Jones, but with Malik Neighbors there, they do have at least a chance. But and then you factoring their injuries, obviously it looks like Jordan Mailata is not going to play. Dallas Goedert's status is kind of up in the air. So it looks like Fred Johnson's going to get the start. It is worth noting that they did get Tyler Steen some first team snaps, I believe. He's working as a second team left guard, but it could be a chance they could possibly move Mekhi Becton to left tackle and then Steen to right guard. Given the work that they have been doing this week, so in practice. So that's another thing to consider. I don't think that's the direction they're going to go. I think they're going to go with Fred Johnson. So, I do think this is a favorable matchup for the Eagles. I do think Saquon's going to come out very motivated. He arguably had his worst game as an Eagle. Not arguably, I thought it was his worst game as an Eagle on this last Sunday. So I think he's going to be very motivated. And even with the loss of Jordan Mailata, I think Fred Johnson's fine. And, I have all the faith in the world in Jeff Stoutland to coach these guys up. There's a chance that the Giants are going to be without both Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns, which is the meat and potatoes of that defense. And if those guys are out, I think the Eagles are going to feast. And nothing really, Kayvon Thibodeau is a good player, but when you lose your two best players defensively, and you're a defensive team in a lot of ways, that's going to bode well for the Eagles. And the Eagles have their number. It's interesting because the Eagles and Giants rivalry used to be such a great rivalry. It was arguably the best rivalry in football, and it really hasn't been a rivalry. The Eagles have pretty much had their way with them. So, I think the Eagles can take care of business here and get right and win convincingly. I think they're going to want to play for Nick Sirianni, whether he deserves guys to vouch for him or not. I think given all the noise, it's just like, all right, enough. Let's turn the page. If you're BG or, Lane Johnson, I feel like they're going to want to, show out for him to kind of quiet the noise. And it's a rivalry week. And, Nick Sirianni has had success against the Giants. So it's going to be interesting, to see how they come out. But I do think that this can be the get right game that we've all been waiting for, a comfortable win for the Eagles. And I do think that they're going to do it. So, I do feel good about this matchup, especially if Burns and Dexter Lawrence are out, even with the loss of, even if Goddard and Mailata don't play, you still have, a formidable offensive line, and I think Fred Johnson's done a decent job filling in there. So, yeah, I think this is a matchup that the Eagles really like, and I think they're going to take advantage. So that's that. Let's talk about the Phillies. So they had their end of season meetings with Dave Dombrowski and Rob Thompson. They're bringing back everybody on the coaching staff. I could have sworn that Kevin Long was going to be the scapegoat here, given how the bats have been cold the last 2 years, and they're keeping him, and I don't like that. I think they needed to make a change. I think they needed to set a precedent, like, hey, something needs to change here, because you're not going to fire Topper. As much as I've been critical of Topper in the postseason, he didn't have a great postseason. Ultimately the players have to show out. And manager can only do so much, but he didn't. He also didn't put them in the best of situations throughout the playoffs. And this was more of an indictment on the hitting, more so than anything else. And I could have swore Kevin Long was going to be long gone, no pun intended. But yeah, no, they're keeping him. And Dave Dombrowski says that we're pretty much going to run it back with what we got. And listen, like I mentioned before, the window is not closed, and you don't need to make wholesale changes. Like you're going to want to keep the core for the most part, but you're going to have to make a change in terms of players. And to me, like I've said numerous times, I think JT Realmuto, moving off of him, you don't have to pay a premium on a catcher, and you can use that money elsewhere to possibly get an outfielder, another guy, closer perhaps. But they're going to have to make some changes, whether it's the lineup, whether it's in free agency, whether it's in trades. They're going to have to do something. And one of those changes I've been hearing, and I don't, and I think that it's not the worst idea in the world, and that's moving Trey Turner to the outfield. Obviously, Trey in the regular season stepped up in a big way, given his slow start last year. But in the postseason, he obviously fell apart, and in the last 2 elimination games, he played poorly, both at the plate and in the field. And he's not the greatest fielder in the world, and they do need offensive help. And they could possibly put Sosa there at shortstop. I thought he did some nice things this year. You could also bring in somebody relatively cheaper. But they do need an offensive bat in the outfield. He can be that. And then they can also, like I said, bring in a guy or two or keep Sosa. I don't know if they'll do that, but it's not the worst idea in the world. So, yeah, I don't love the lack of urgency that from Dave Dombrowski and this organization. It's not something that the fans want to hear. There needs to be something. I don't know what that is. Like I said, whether it's a lineup change, whether it's a wholesale change in the lineup to completely revamp that, whether it's bringing in another outfielder, another closer, trading one of your core pieces to get younger, and also have that flexibility to make a big move at the trade deadline. I don't think they're getting Juan Soto, so I think people need to stop with that. I don't think that they're going to have the money to pay him, because you probably have to make him your highest paid player, and you already have a lot of guys like Harper and Turner on your payroll. So at some point that rent's going to come due. Obviously, there's no salary cap, but you have to deal with the tax, and at some point, there's only so much money Montgomery can spend. So, but he's willing to spend it. So there is that, but at some point the rent does come due. So I don't think that's going to happen. So I don't love the sense of urgency or the lack of sense of urgency there. And I do think there needs to be changes. So, hopefully they do something, because we cannot be we cannot trend in this direction, because it doesn't look great. The window's still open. When you go from the World Series, only getting to the World Series, only getting to the NLCS, and then only getting to the NLDS. It's sort of like 08 to 2011 all over again, and that's something that Phillies fans and the Phillies themselves need to avoid at all costs. So that's pretty much it on the Phillies. I want to talk a little bit about the Sixers. Man, injuries piling up there, huh? You have Paul George hyperextending his knee. They're going to get a better sense of his timeline come next Tuesday as they gear up for the Bucks on I believe it's the 22nd, if I'm not mistaken. Next Wednesday, excuse me. So that, yeah, or no, 23rd, excuse me. So it'd be the 23rd. Obviously, they shut down Joel Embiid for the remainder of the preseason. Keith Pompey said, or Nick Nurse said, he reported that we'll get a better idea of the beginning of next week if Joel and Paul George will be able to play Wednesday in the season opener against the Milwaukee Bucks. And it's just like, yeah, man, the injury bug it can is always going to affect this team, and it's always going to affect Joel Embiid. And Joel Embiid said basically he's probably not going to have any more back-to-back games. And I mean, I get it, because he is getting up there. Not like, I mean, he's not terribly old, but he's adding a lot of mileage there, I guess. But and he's always had injury concerns, and I guess it's wise. But when you're paying him all that money, and we're still having this conversation in terms of injuries, okay, I guess. I mean, this is what I'm saying about Sixers fatigue in the city, man. Like, there's a lot of people that just do not care as much about the Sixers anymore. I mean, they got into the whole process, and for a while it was exciting, it was great, but man, dude, it just seems like it's the same old problems. And listen, like, I get it. Joel's a big guy, and the way he plays, it's not great for your knees. But if you're paying him all that money and you're expecting him to get this team over the hump, his health is a problem. That's part of the problem in terms of not playing, not being able to produce in the postseason. So again, we're having the same old conversation with Joel Embiid's health, and like when he's healthy, yeah, he's dominant, he's great, but it's just a never ending thing that we're just gonna have to always monitor throughout, and it's annoying, and it's frustrating. And like I said, like when he's on and he's healthy, he's indestructible. But these injuries keep piling up, and at some point, you just got to realize that it's not wise. When your star player missed the first 2 seasons and has had injury upon injury upon injury upon injury plaguing him, this guy might not be the best guy to build around. And that's just something that Sixers fans and the Sixers themselves have to reconcile with. So, I hope he can play in the season opener as well as Paul George. It doesn't seem like it's going to be that big of a deal. It's not like these guys are going to be out for a significant period of time. But again, man, it's the same old shit with this team and the injuries, and it's really frustrating. And I'll tell you that it's really frustrating. And for all the people that defend Joel Embiid, well, you got to, it's a smart move to not have him play back to back. But if a guy can't play back to back, you probably shouldn't pay him all that money, and you probably shouldn't make him the focal point of your team. You know what I mean? So at some point, they're just going to have to be like, listen, dude, at some point, we got to make a decision. And it's just the same shit, different year with this team. And, unfortunately, it's happening, right before the season, and it's not great. So that's sort of my take on the Sixers. I want to let you know about Decals by Aaron. If you're looking for the best Delco merchandise, I know a lot of people are very prideful of being from Delco, and there's no other way. There's no better way to show your pride for Delco than going to Decals by Aaron. You can go to the website at decalsbyaaron.com or go to their Facebook page. They have all the Delco gear that you want, and that's something that Delco aficionados might want to take advantage. So go to Decals by Aaron, whether it's by Facebook or go to decalsbyaaron.com. They will hook you up. So the Flyers start in the West Coast. They're 3 games in. They're 1-1-1. And this is to, pretty much be expected. They're pretty much what a lot of people expected. They did not get the luck of the draw in terms of the start of the season, playing 4 games out in the West Coast. It'll come to an end tonight against the Seattle Kraken. But, there's a lot of good things there. Mitchkov obviously got his first 2 goals on Tuesday. That's good to see, and good to see him show up on the stat sheet. He should get confident. He should build off of that and have some confidence. Travis Konechny's off to a really good start. A guy that I'm really high on is going to be a catalyst for this team. Obviously everyone's going to be looking at Mitchkov to be the guy, to be the catalyst going forward long term. But right now, this team basically goes as far as Travis Konechny goes. He's your best offensive player. He's a guy that people resonate with, they rally around, and it's good to see him starting off the season very hot. So that's good, but there also are some issues. Goaltending is a bit shaky. I thought Samuel Ersson had a really good game 1, despite the lack of help defensively, and that's sort of a thing that's been plaguing the Flyers as well. It's really hard to kind of gauge, and grade the goaltending when they're not really getting a fair shake with the lack of defense around them. So that's sort of been the issue there. It's the defense is not complementing the goaltending, that's not great. When you have the defensive players, not stepping up, and when you got uncertainty at goalie, you need to take advantage and sort of play complementary hockey there and not put your goalie in harm's way. So. It's tough. Obviously they're going up against Edmonton, who's a really good team. They were in the Stanley Cup last year. It's not the greatest draw for the Flyers starting on the West Coast like this, and they're sort of weathering the storm in a lot of ways. But hopefully the defense and the goaltending can complement each other going forward. But that's sort of the observations I see. Obviously, if you're looking for Flyers coverage, Old City Sports is the place to be, the place to go. Flyers Alley, best in the biz. And shout out to those guys who do a really good job. So that's going to be it for me today. I wish I got a podcast earlier in the week, but a lot of real life situations kind of delayed that. But I'm back, and hopefully I can do this more consistently. Before I go, I want to shout out my buddy Nick Rule. Him and his lovely wife Sam just gave birth to their daughter Ellie. Shout out to them. Good things with my friends there. Shout out to you guys, and I will catch you guys later. Hopefully, I can start or do a podcast earlier next week as opposed to Thursday. But that was kind of the draw I had this week. But until next time, catch you later.